Okay, so we are continuing our careful look at the Garden of Eden story. And we have met Adam and Chava, after known in English as Eve. We have seen the story where God tells Adam that on don't eat the fruit. Basically, there were two trees growing in the center of the garden that have names. None of the other trees are named. And tree number one is called Eitz Da'at Tov V'Ra, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And the other one is Eitz Chaim, the tree of life. I think I pointed out that in other places in the Bible where it talks about knowledge of good and evil, it's a merism. And the idea is that when the phrase that someone has knowledge of good and evil is a way of describing generalized knowledge. It's not just good and only evil, but it's knowledge of many things. And and okay, so that's basically where we are. Any comments on the Garden of Eden before we dive back into the story?
Rabbi,
Yes.
did Adam and Eve even know what good and evil were?
Well, apparently,
I
hold on. I always insist that you let me answer a question
no, no,
before
no.
you
I was going to
argue
say
with
I
me.
think not. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, so evidently, eating the fruit gave them knowledge of good and evil.
No, I
Uh,
understand that, but prior to it, when they were told not to eat it, did they have any idea what good and evil were?
So the issue is the biblical story is silent on that.
Okay.
There's lots of midrash, and actually, Erwin is as knowledgeable in midrash as I am, and he is aware of lots of midrash. I'm not aware of any midrash rabbinic stories that that tell us that. I mean, the simple meaning of the text is that when they eat it, presumably they will get knowledge
Right.
of good and evil and maybe everything in between. And the other issue, of course, with the tree of life is presumably if they eat from the tree of life, they will live maybe forever. But we haven't gotten there yet because we haven't yet met the serpent. And so he is going to talk. But God basically says to the man, he doesn't speak to the woman about this. He says, don't eat from the tree in the center of the garden, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And he says, on the day you eat of it, you will surely die. And there's some translation issues, but it's basically it's an emphasis, and the language is b'yom achalcha, on the day you eat of it. And you can say that death enters the world, that they became spiritually dead. I mean, lots of different commentators and different religions will take this story and because obviously they don't die. They go on to be expelled from the garden. We know this. They become parents of Cain and Abel. I can't remember how many years they live, but it's hundreds of years. So they don't die on the day they eat of it. So we have that issue. So it's my contention that of all the characters, there are four characters in the story: Adam, Chava, the serpent, and God. And I argue that the only one who everything he says is true is the serpent. And so we're going to meet the serpent right now, and we're going to keep track of what the serpent says, and we're going to keep track of whether it turns out to be true. Okay, so I'm going to do a screen share. We'll see how this works. So I'm doing it slightly differently than I usually do it. I presume you can see it where it says the serpent and the woman. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. So now I'm just reading text. Genesis 3:1 to 7. I have the Sepharia with the Hebrew available easily. But the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Adonai God had made. And he said to the woman, has God said you shall not eat of every tree in the garden? And I wanted to point out that the word for subtle is arum, and the word for naked is arumim. They're basically the same root, so there's a pun going on there, which you don't hear unless you you hear in you're reading it in the Hebrew. And the serpent asks a question, which I'm going to suggest is a very clever way of getting into this discussion. He doesn't say, did God say, don't eat of that tree? He says, did God say, don't eat of any tree? And the woman said to the serpent, we may eat of the fruits of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, surely you shall not die. For God knows that in the day you eat of it, then your eyes shall be open, and you will be as gods or like gods. The Hebrew is Elohim. You mean like God, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit and ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. And the eyes of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together, and they made themselves loincloths. So let me see if I can't remember what I have here. Yeah, so I'm just going to point out. I know we discussed some of this last time, and I don't remember where exactly. Maybe I jumped back a few slides. So on one level, he says, "You won't die." That's true; they don't die. He says, "Your eyes will be open, and you will be like God." And then their eyes of them were open, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloths. I think we discussed last time the type of fruit is not mentioned. It is not mentioned that it's an apple. It's not mentioned it's anything else. The rabbis think it was figs because the first thing they do is cover themselves with fig leaves. Les and then Erwin.
Is it that God only talks to Adam and the serpent only talks to Eve?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, yeah, I never really focused on that before. But um, and I think we're going to get into it because one of the questions that arises, God says to Adam, don't eat of this tree. And the woman reports to the snake, God has said, don't eat of it, don't touch it. So that's an interesting one. We'll get, I think we're going to discuss who told her not to touch it um, as we get into it. But yeah, it looks like, well, God is going to speak to the woman uh, in connection with the consequences of eating the fruit later in the story. Erwin.
Yes, in the beginning of the Genesis, when God creates all the animals, for some reason he created the snake and told the snake that he gonna crawl
No, no,
all
nope,
his.
nope. You got the story confused. Erwin, the idea that the snake will crawl on its belly is going to be after the Garden of Eden. It's not in the opening story.
Okay, but so my other question is that why God gave the snake so much knowledge that the snake can ask these important questions to.
So the snake is a vehicle for telling the story. Um, that no one seems surprised that the snake is talking, just like in the story of Balaam and Balak,
Yeah.
the donkey talks. Nobody seems surprised that the donkey talks. So the snake is clearly just a vehicle for moving the story along. And I think also one of the things going on in the story is this idea of understanding origins. Why is it that men and women are chasing after each other and trying to become one flesh, quite literally? And the answer is here's the story. Never mind that other animals, of course, do this too, particularly other animals, other mammals. Why is it that snakes are so creepy and people kind of hate snakes? Well, this is part of that origin of story. Why is it that women give birth and give birth in pain? That's part of this story. Why do we have to work so hard to earn a living? So a lot of things are going on here in which this story seeks to explain. Why are we mortal? You can argue that this story explains why we're mortal. So I think It's a story of origins. Ken.
Yeah.
I okay. I had heard that from the Hebrew, it's not clear that it was necessarily a snake, that it could have been some other creature as well, even though it seems like it's more commonly interpreted as snake.
Well, I don't know the answer to that. So here's a question. Do you now see, you still see
Yes.
the old slides, or do you now see Safaria?
Yeah.
Safaria.
Oh, good. Okay, so if I go here, so the I'm just highlighting Nachash, which which is um which is the serpent, and so it seems like it's always pretty much a serpent. There was a
Okay.
king named
Thanks.
that, and so on. I mean, we could look at the other thing you can do is look at other translations, but I've never actually heard that or followed that idea that it may have been something else. Let me see if I can. Oops, sorry, I'm getting a little lost here. Hang on. Okay. And did I start recording? I don't recall. I don't think so.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, I did. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna from current
Question.
slide.
If
Yeah.
Adam and Eve didn't get the fruit from the tree, would they have the kids? Because when they were in the paradise, they didn't have a kid. Maybe they didn't know about the sex.
Well, we actually, yeah, no, you're right that they Eve gives birth after the Garden of Eden story. So
Yeah.
we don't know if there was sexual attraction. I think that's one interpretation of the story, is that part of this knowledge of good and evil is becoming sexual. And they also said that they were naked, but they were not ashamed. So that gives a hint to maybe they were not, sexually aroused. So we don't know, but we can look at hints in the story. I mean, my point, which I made last time, is what's naked and not ashamed? Babies and animals. So one of my major takes on this story is this is a story of human becoming humans and not baby-like and not animal-like. But we'll see if I will share that as we go on. Henry.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out the word they use here now, the serpent was more subtle. The one interpretation I had was crafty, and the one that you showed in Safaria was what, shrewd? And I kind of like that better than the word subtle there.
Yeah.
Just kind of
So there it is,
the way I
Arun.
see it.
So just looking at Safaria's translation, shrewd, subtle, shrewd, crafty, sly, sensible. So yeah, just different English.
Yeah,
English.
subtle, I don't know. I have a kind of a different take on it, but the words like shrewd and crafty.
Yeah. So yes, so again, I always talk about Hebrew and how multivalent it is. How many different. Let's see. How can I find this? What is going on? Okay, I am now getting confused. Okay, oh, that's right. I want PowerPoint. Okay, I'm getting there. Okay. All right. So we've got basically this is the biblical text, and now I'm going to raise some questions. So there's Chava with the serpent. So I it's my supposition. I mean, you sort of have to guess what I'm thinking. What I would say that the serpent's question is a particularly crude question about engaging Chava, engaging Eve. I just met Bruce down just joined the room. Hi, Bruce. So one of the things that's going on here is the serpent asks the woman, has God said you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And she says, no, we can eat of all the other trees, but it's only this particular one. So I actually think it's a pretty shrewd way that the serpent engages the conversation, because the natural question that you might expect the serpent to say is, has God told you that you shouldn't eat from that tree, the tree of knowledge of good and evil? And then the woman's reaction would be, that's what God said. And end of discussion, not very interesting. But by asking a much broader question, he invites her into a conversation. No, there's lots of trees, but only this one. We can't eat of it and we can't touch it. So then the next question is, when God speaks to Adam, he says, you shall not eat of it. God doesn't say anything in our text about not touching the fruit. So who told her not to touch the fruit? This is not a particularly difficult question. There aren't very many characters in the story. Yeah, Henry?
Maybe serpent.
Adam.
So,
Adam, I think he told Eve, after he had that conversation with God, he said, and don't even bother touching it.
yeah. So probably not the serpent, because this is the first time the serpent is talking to Eve. So, my take on this is Adam says to Eve, don't eat it, don't touch it, don't look at it. We're going to build a fence around it. It's going to have barbed wire. This tree is trouble. So, but one midrash, I don't think I have collections of these midrashes in my slides. One midrash is that what actually happened is the serpent, as part of this discussion, pushes her into the tree and she touches the fruit and she doesn't die. So the lesson that the rabbis draw from this, which of course they proceed to ignore in spades, is you shouldn't make up extra rules. Adam adds an extra rule, don't touch it. And that may have proved to be Eve's undoing, because she realized when she touched it, she didn't die. So then the question that we're going to continue to look at is the serpent speaking the truth? So what does the serpent say? He says, you will not die. Well, that turns out to be true. And then it says, on the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be to Elohim, which can mean like gods or like God, capital G. This is always fun now to keep going back and forth. This translation is divine being, but the Hebrew there is ka Elohim, Yodea Tov V'Ra, who knows good and bad. So well, we don't know if she is going to become like God yet. So that we'll have to keep an open mind on. And so then here's a question. This question, of course, is answered by Midrash. Where was the man during the conversation?
And who gave this information to the snake, to serpent?
The serpent
God
just
gave
asked a
it-
question. Hold on. The serpent just asked a question. The question that the serpent asks is, did God say you couldn't eat from any of the trees? And then she gives an answer. And then the serpent says, no, you're not going to die, but your eyes will be open and you're going to be like God. So your question is a great question. The biblical author doesn't seem to be all that interested in the answer to that question. I'm interested in it because it's my supposition that it's only the serpent who says all truth and nothing but the truth. Everyone else lies. But we don't know. I mean, how did the serpent know this? We don't know. And apparently the Bible itself isn't interested in that. I wouldn't be surprised to find midrash about that. So anybody have any guesses? The Bible doesn't say where the man was during the conversation. There's a midrash that they had just been making love and he was asleep.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. He's probably sleeping.
Yes. And of course, the other interesting thing is, who's the theologian in the story? It's Chava. It's the woman discussing and arguing with the snake. She has to make this decision and she decides to eat of it. What happens? She just gives it to him and he agrees to eat it. He doesn't come off sounding like a thinking, intelligent person, but he does sound like someone who listens to his wife. I often, I do a lot of weddings. So the one piece of prenuptial advice that I always give is there are two rules to a happy marriage. Rule number one is happy wife, happy life. Rule number two is there is no rule number two. See rule number one. Evidently, Adam had that firmly fixed. God says, don't eat the fruit. His wife says, eat the fruit. He eats the fruit. There's another midrash that the woman, when she ate the fruit, she was afraid that she was going to die, and Adam would find another woman. Don't ask me where he's going to find the other woman. But so she didn't want that to happen, so she made sure that he ate it also. Not a very kind interpretation. Okay, we're going to continue on in Genesis 3. God calls out to the man and says, "Where are you?" And actually, I ought to just jump to Safari rather than, so this is like 3:9. Whoops, sorry, it's right here. Okay, so here we are. They heard the sound of God moving about the garden in the breezy time of the day. So this is very anthropomorphic. God makes noise moving around the Garden of Eden. And God called out to the human. I like the translation here rather than the man, because Adam probably just means a human, and says, Ayeka, where are you? And he replied, I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked, and so I hid. And God says, and I have to add a little innuendo to the way God speaks here. He said, told you you were naked. From that tree from which I had forbidden you to eat. Okay, I'm going to jump back to my PowerPoint. Did you eat? And of course, the man's response, being very, very, upstanding and forthright, says, "It's not my fault. The woman you put at my side, she gave me of the tree, and I ate." And it reminds me of a I don't know if this is a rabbinic story or just a joke, but basically, in the old country, there's a robber and a watchman, and finally, this robber who's been robbing the village for quite some time is caught, and the watchman brings him before a judge, and the judge asks him, "So what's your defense?" And the robber said, "You shouldn't punish me. I'm a robber. It's my job to rob. I was just doing my job. But the watchman, it was his job to catch me. He is really at fault because he didn't do his job." So this reminds me of Adam's statement. It's your fault. This woman, who asked for her anyway, this woman that you put by my side, she gave me of the tree and I ate. And the woman's response in the very next line was basically, again, it's not my fault. The serpent duped me. And there's probably lots of different, let's take a look. Now that I have Safari, I can't resist. The serpent duped me, that's the same thing. Said the woman. Hashi'eni. So to beguile or deceive. So, they use the term duped, deceived, hishieni. And I think it's actually in the Heathfield, which is, to beguile or deceive. Okay. So, okay. Let me go back to, where's my PowerPoint? There it is. So anyway, at least now there's some question about whether the humans are telling the truth. We already had a question about whether God is telling the truth, but so far I haven't caught the serpent in any lies. So now what I'm calling now, I'm not calling it punishments, and I'm not calling it sin for a very specific reason. I'm describing this as consequences of disobedience. So in Genesis 3:16, to the woman he said, I will greatly multiply the pain of your childbearing. In sorrow you shall bring forth children, and your desire shall be to your husband, and he shall rule over you. And so there's a bunch of interesting things going on here. Presumably, none of them are supposed to be good. So in sorrow, or usually, you'll have pain in childbearing. In sorrow you'll bring forth children. Your desire shall be to your husband, and he'll rule over you. And then to the man he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife and eaten of the tree which I commanded you, saying you shall not eat of it, cursed is the ground for your sake. By toil you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to you, and you shall eat of the herb of the field. By the sweat of your face you'll eat bread until you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. Let me see what I have next. Okay, so, and then, again, if we it's probably worth taking a quick look at the biblical text. I didn't include what God says to the serpent, and he says, because you did this, more cursed shall you be than all the cattle and the wild beast. On your belly shall you crawl, and dirt you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity, hatred between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. They shall strike at your head, and you shall strike at their heel. And to the woman, he says, I'll greatly expand your hard labor, your pregnancies. Actually, this translation is an interesting one, which we'll see. Yeah, this is what we read. Okay, so I'm going to go back to PowerPoint. So these are the consequences. And so for the man, it's going to be hard to earn a living. For the woman, you're going to give birth in pain. And the serpent is going to crawl on its belly and so on. Erwin.
Yes, I would like to ask you, Rabbi, in my point of view, God created this problem. He planted through 2 trees. He didn't have to plant the other tree, and Adam and Eve would have lived happily ever after. So he created this problem, and he introduces this snake, and anyway, they ate from and then what the consequences were that they ate the tree, and then he punishes Adam and Eve. So
what way does he punish them?
Well, he punishes them that she's gonna have a very difficult childbirth.
Okay, we're going to discuss that. Okay, so the question is,
my question is
yes.
that why did God create this problem?
So let me ask you a question back. Would it have been better had there been no tree of knowledge of good and evil?
Yes, I think so, because then they would have learned on their own experience. If they leave
what would they learn?
They would have learned how to survive and all sorts of.
They would have no problem surviving. The food would just grow, and they would sit and eat and enjoy. There was nothing to learn. Why do they have to learn anything?
It was boring. If they just was like that, it was boring.
I think that's an insult to the word boring.
The question is that my question is what I struggle with, that why did God create this problem?
Okay, so that's a very good question, and we're going to get to it. Last week we had a Catholic friend of mine, Jim. Bruce is another Catholic friend of mine. And he suggested that the snake committed entrapment and entrapped the man and woman. And it never occurred to me, but I'm going to suggest that God is committing entrapment here. So why does God want this to happen? That's your question, Erwin. It's a great question, and I have an answer. I mean, it's not original to me.
Because God sent a snake over there purposely. So all of these things are created that, that these two, Adam and Eve.
Yeah. Okay, you've stated your question really well, and I promise you we're going to get to it. I don't know if we'll get to it tonight, but we will definitely get to it. I think it's a central question of the story. Les.
I think if they did not know the difference between good and evil, then there could be no such thing as a good person. If all you can do is good, then there's nothing special about you. There's no, you know what I'm saying? We try to, without evil, you could only do good, and then we'd all be robots. So
Right. And is that a world you'd want to live in?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's the question I'm asking. I'm gonna get into this in much more detail. Ken.
A rabbi I knew one time told me, and I really like this story, that he said from a sort of from a psychology standpoint, Adam and Eve were like children or teenagers, and what do you know if you tell a teenager not to do something, what are
Do
they
it.
going to do? They're going to go and do that, and
Yeah,
that's
I'm going to get into
actually
that one. I'm going to get into that in great detail too. So one of the questions to keep in the back of your mind is, did God want them to eat of the fruit? That
Yes.
that's I mean, yeah, okay. So I think if you ask Christians, the answer would be unequivocally no. That it, and again, different Christian traditions have different takes on this, but certainly from a Catholic point of view, and I think also from Protestant thought, this is original sin. It stains all of humankind. Lois.
What the central question to me is the idea of God creating humans with free will, because they decide to eat this before they've eaten it. They defy God um, before they have the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
So, and in the story, for whatever, regardless of what we actually believe, he's created them because he wanted partners.
So
And
I absolutely agree with you, and that's
okay,
where my take on this story is headed.
okay.
Okay. So here are some key questions which we're going to discuss. I'm not asking folks necessarily to answer all the key questions. Uh, First of all, was eating the fruit a sin? Is the whole story a setup? And I love Jim's way of raising the question, was it entrapment? And if it was entrapment, who is the entrapper and who is the entrappee? Was it the serpent, the entrap person committing entrapment, or God? What are the meanings of the consequences of eating the fruit? Did the serpent speak truth? Why were Adam and Eve expelled from the garden? And we're going to meet some cherubs. And what's the role of the cherub? And what the heck is a cherub anyway? And again, some of you have read this story before, but it's amazing how even though if you read it, you may not catch it. Anybody just want to answer the question, why were Adam and Eve expelled from the garden?
So they wouldn't eat from the tree of life.
No.
Right. And that's the answer is actually given in the text. People usually say it was a punishment for eating the fruit. Erwin.
I just want to, this is my theory or midrash for the whole Torah, the Tanakh, that God created Adam and Eve, and it created with one major fault that we were very poor of listening to God right from the beginning, and that's why they, fell into this problem that they ate from the apple because
So
God told
Erwin,
them.
I'm gonna challenge you on that. Would the world be better off if people always listened to God and did everything that God said?
Yes, I think so.
Would you want to have children who would listen to absolutely everything you say and never do anything that you said wasn't they shouldn't do?
But he's not
That
God.
that's if I answered that question, it would might incriminate me.
Okay. Yes, you can take the fifth.
Yeah,
And the fifth commandment is honor your father and your mother. So that's a perfect
yeah, yeah,
one to take here. Okay.
yeah.
So let's continue. So
But
the first, go
I,
ahead, Farah.
I think that God make like a mm, play that it was like this one, that they come here and then take the fruit and go out of that. Everything God before put that scenario and did it.
For what reason?
He knows, I don't notice it.
Okay. Well, we're gonna get there. Les.
I may be going out on a limb, but if God didn't want us to eat of the tree, he wouldn't have planted it. Period.
Right. So then that raises the question, Why did God plant it? Why did God create this scenario? That's what we're going to get to.
So that, well, I
Sure.
think if we were, robots and couldn't do anything, we couldn't bring him glory. We give glory when we read what he commands us, and then out of free will, we respond and do and honor him.
Okay.
That would be the
Okay.
way I would
Yeah.
think of it.
Yep. I'm headed in the same direction. Suzanne.
Well, I guess, I'm gonna, go in a different direction. I don't feel like the Bible cares about those questions. I feel like it's written by people. This is not like, oh, this is happening right now, let's explain it. It's like way looking back and saying, why do we have so much pain in childbirth? Why do we have all of this stuff? And then here are these stories. So, I
So
mean,
one of the purposes of the story is to explain these things, right? About human nature. Why we have pain in childbirth, for example.
it explains why we have pain in childbirth, but it doesn't.
I
But
can
some of the
Hold on,
questions,
Erwin, let her finish.
I think some of the questions just are not, they're not something that the author really cared about. They're just assumed and they're just in the story.
Oh, but I care about them.
Okay.
So, and I have to say, we've been reading this story for about 2,500 years, at least. This is the scholars believe the Torah achieved its current form about 2,500 years ago. And we read this story once a year in depth, right?
Mhm.
So
Right.
it is Jewish to read the story deeply, deeply, deeply. Those of you that know me well know that I don't take the stories literally. I don't believe for a minute this is a historical account, that this actually happened. But it is our central myth. It is the central story, our central story of origins. And as our central story of origins, it deserves a lot of interest and attention. Okay. The World Series isn't a central story of origins, but it certainly gets a lot of attention. So if you can spend, your entire day screaming and yelling in Los Angeles about how the Dodgers won the World Series, we can spend a few hours struggling with this text. But it is very Jewish to wrestle with the text. So I would say if you're not interested in wrestling with Torah texts, you've probably come to the wrong place.
No, I mean, I understand that. I just think some questions are not really the questions that are the ones they just don't. I don't think anybody at the time that it was written wanted to know, why did God make the
Oh,
trees?
so I'm going to address some of these things, and it is my contention that in fact the story is designed to address these issues.
Okay.
Whether it's written by God or whether it's written by people under the influence of God, under the inspiration of God, I believe the purpose of the story is to address these issues. But you don't have to agree with me. Okay, so these are the questions we're going to look at. So the first question is, was it a sin? It's generally called original sin. And certainly in Christian thought, it's the most pervasive sin of all. It affects all of humankind. And again, thinking of Christian theology, it takes the death, the sacrifice of God becoming human to atone for this sin. So in Christian thought, there is no question that this is a sin. But it is interesting that the Hebrew Bible never refers to what happened in the Garden of Eden as a sin. And there's a lot of discussion in the Hebrew Bible about sin. The prophets rant and rail against sin and catalog sins against God, never refer to the Garden of Eden as a place where a sin occurred. In fact, every reference to the Garden of Eden in the Hebrew Bible is a positive one about how wonderful it was in the Garden of Eden. And so anyway, I talked about original sin as a concept is not part of Judaism. In fact, the key prayer in our morning liturgy proclaims, the soul that you, my God, has given me is pure. Elohai neshama shenatata bi tahorahi. And some of the scholars believe that this prayer was sort of snuck into our liturgy as a very subtle way of refuting the idea of original sin. Les.
Could you define how Judaism defines sin?
Judaism defines sin as missing the mark, disobeying Jewish law. The word
There was
Torah.
no Jewish law back then. There was just God. And
Right.
so
Right.
where's sin come into it? I mean,
Well, the first time sin is mentioned actually is in the story of Cain and Abel,
Mhm.
where God says that sin crouches at your door. One of the words for sin is chet, and the origin of that word is from archery. It means to miss the mark. So the basic concept in Judaism is God has given us a path to walk. The Hebrew verb to walk is holech, and the word for Jewish law, is halacha. Same thing in Arabic, actually. And so sin typically means straying from that path. But the point is, our culture defines this as the first and most pervasive sin, certainly Christian culture.
Yes.
And I just want to point out that nowhere in the Hebrew Bible is this even referred to as a sin.
No, because it wasn't, that's where I'm coming from, Rabbi, that I think it's not a sin because it was not their doing.
Well, God said to Adam, don't eat of the fruit. Adam tells his wife Eve, God has told us not to eat of this fruit. They decide to eat of the fruit. I mean, they're tempted by the serpent, who tells them you're not going to die. But they clearly make a decision to eat of the fruit. God didn't force them to eat of the fruit.
So, Rabbi, if I have a person who is a drug addict living in my house,
right?
And I left a couple of $100 bills on the kitchen counter. Is the guy committing or a person committing a sin taking the money? Because
yes, they are under Jewish law, they are committing a sin, and so are you, because there's a specific commandment in Leviticus 19: do not leave a stumbling block in front of the blind. And that's been interpreted as saying if you know someone will be tempted to steal, you don't leave it out there to make it easy for them to steal. So they're both committing sins.
you are right. You are right. I'm sorry. You are absolutely.
Oh, don't be sorry. Occasionally it happens. I'm right. Okay. So now the question is, was it a setup? Did God want them to eat of the fruit of this tree? And if not, why place it at the center, make it so enticing, and create the serpent to teach them about it? I think that's what Erwin asks. Yeah, okay. So here's the example I always use. It's going to be on the next slide. Let me put it up there. So here's a contemporary parallel. Mom and dad decide to leave the kids on their own. They're, 12, 13, 14. They're old enough we don't have to hire a babysitter. Say, we trust you. You can heat the pizza in the microwave, make some popcorn, watch your favorite shows. You have our cell phone numbers. And just as they're leaving, they say, oh, yeah, don't look in mom's upper left-hand drawer. Okay, everybody with me in this example?
Yep.
So here's the question. Question number one, how long before they look?
Is it upstairs or on the ground floor?
Sorry?
5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. Now here's the more difficult question. Would you really want to have children who, in this example, would not look?
Wow, that's a good question.
Presumably, if you actually did such a thing, you would leave, Frozen 14 in the mom's upper left-hand drawer so they can watch this movie that they've been begging you to buy. I don't even know if there are still DVDs for movies, but basically you would leave a special treat for them because you would be absolutely certain that they would look. Presumably, you wouldn't leave a loaded gun in mom's upper left-hand drawer where the kids can get at it. So here's my question to you, and I'm really interested in your response. Would you want to have kids in this example who would not look?
No.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Right.
You need
I would.
curiosity to find out what's going on. And
Who would? Sorry.
Curiosity is.
I said I would. I would
Okay.
want a kid who respected me as the parent. I don't understand why I would put the stumbling block out. That's the problem here for me. But I would want my kids to obey whatever I told them not to
So
do.
you would want to, I'm phrasing this in a slightly different way. You would want to have children who in their entire life never did anything against your instructions to them.
Sweetheart, my darling rabbi, this does not say their entire life and everything I ever said. It's one specific example.
Okay, so my point is the last one. Can you have human free will in theory without demonstrating it? And this actually gave me a lot of comfort with my own kids. Can you be a full
it's just
human?
like saying you can have the freedom to run out in traffic. That doesn't mean you have to do it.
Okay, but I'm saying this is a story of origins. So presumably before they eat, I mean, Erwin raised the question, our problem is that we disobey God. So now the question is it a setup? And Erwin raised the question, why would God put this in the center of the garden? Clearly, God wants them to eat of it. So the question is why? It's my contention so that free will enters the human race. Ken.
Well, yeah, that's it. I was thinking I would want if I had children, I would want them to look because it shows a certain level of curiosity. And I would want my children to be curious about things because if they're not, again, I think they're not going to learn very well for one thing if they're not very curious. And a theory that I had um, regarding this is God first made man and woman. He wanted to check them out just to see whether they turned out okay. Once he saw that they turned out okay, then he didn't want them to be naive or as Les has been saying, he didn't want them to be robots. And that's why he put the tree in there was so that now they could eat of the tree and now they would get free will. And in fact, he would have company. They're going to be they'll I don't know whether you want to say they provide entertainment for them, but certainly it makes things a little
I
more
didn't hear what you
interesting.
said.
I said I don't know whether they provide entertainment for them, but at least it makes things a little more interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say again, Eden is a story of origins, and this story is the origin of free will, and not having humans just be babies or animals that they're naked and they're ashamed. And we're going to see, other elements of this. Less.
What I forgot her name right now. The young lady was saying, if you want people to listen to everything you say and obey authority no matter what they say, it would be a horrible world. I mean,
Okay, so that's again, that's the extreme. I think Lois is not going to that extreme, but I would say that is the
This
extreme.
was one specific thing.
No, one specific is one thing, but he's
in
not
your
asking.
example. In your example, if you said it for everything,
that's what he's asking you. That's the question.
But it's not. It's not. It's one specific thing. The mom says, "Don't look at this," or "Don't look at that."
So at this point in time in the story, God only makes one request of humankind.
Right.
Don't eat.
But
don't eat.
What I said before is, and what I think it demonstrates is before they eat, they already have free will, or they wouldn't have been able to.
So the question is that I'm asking at the bottom of this page is, can you have free will in theory without demonstrating it? No. Can your kids be of a position, I really want to take control of my life. I'm going to determine what I am going to do. But, oh, well, I'm just going to decide to do everything that mom and dad ask me to do. And but in theory, I could do what I want. So to me, that's one of the things that's going on beyond this story. And you actually injected an idea which I hadn't really thought of, which is presumably your children would not expect you to put something hazardous in that drawer. And so the interesting question is, did the people have confidence in God that setting up this tree in the center of the garden would really be okay? That's actually, I have to think more about that one. Erwin and then Ken.
Yeah, I just want to say that, you know, we agreed that God created Adam and Eve, uh, I think, before he planted the tree in a Garden of Eden. I think.
I don't. I'd have to look back at the story.
Okay, I presume that.
Yes, I think I agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wrong. But the example what I want to use, so if he created the two of them before, one, as I said before, Adam and Eve are very poor listeners, number one. And number
Oh
two,
no, Adam heard God and Eve heard God. You mean they're disobedient or they didn't understand?
disobedience.
Okay, there I agree.
Disobedience. And
Yes.
second, he created Eve, that already a woman has very great difficulty. She knows that, or God knows that a woman gonna have very great difficulty giving a childbirth because her hips are very narrow,
Hold on, we're going to get to that. We're going to
and
get to that.
yeah, and the birth canal is very narrow.
So why was Eve so poorly designed, Erwin?
Exactly, Eve is very.
Oh no, that was a question.
Yes, she is.
Okay, so I'm going to get into that. Ken.
She's gonna have pain.
Yeah, in sort of in response or in addition to what Lois said about she said that Adam and Eve had free will before they ate of the tree, and I was thinking that could be the case, but I think they didn't know that they had free will, and
So
by eating of the tree, they learned that they had free will.
yeah, so again, the question I'm asking at the bottom of the page is, can you have free will in theory without demonstrating it? So here I will defer to Cheryl for psychological insights, but one of the things that I learned from this, and you'll see Rabbi Larry Kushner has written a wonderful book on this, which I will introduce either tonight or in 2 weeks. I'm not going to be around next week, um, called How Good Do We Have to Be? So Larry Kushner raises the question, even in the title, is it conceivable because two people ate one piece of fruit that the entire world suffers forever? So in reading that book and the commentary that I'll share with you, I learned, and I think Cheryl, you probably learned this professionally, your kids have to rebel against you. They can't be adult until they find some way to separate. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Cheryl.
Well, and that's why sometimes it's good for parents to throw their kids out of the house.
And would
Otherwise
you also I set up two cherubs with a flaming sword to
Mhm.
prevent them from visiting? Or you think maybe a lock would be
no, but it's like we're getting what we're calling now adultolescence.
okay, that's actually, I think, is what's going on here. I'm gonna just see.
I wanted to say one other thing.
Okay, go ahead.
Not disobeying is also a choice. It's also a free will. It doesn't demonstrate what you're saying. It just means they chose to
So
obey.
here is my question. If the idea of not disobeying, if the idea of disobeying is unacceptable to you, and you forswear ever disobeying God, do you really have free will?
Well, what I said is this is one example. It's not ever.
But it's
I'm
the
just
first
saying,
example. It's the first thing the first humans are doing. They don't
and
have belly buttons yet, so they have to do something. Sorry.
I'm just saying they had free will ahead of time, and they
Okay,
made
and
a
I don't
choice.
I don't even disagree with that.
Right.
But my point is the story requires them to demonstrate it.
And as another cultural lens, which a lot of cultures don't believe that you have to disobey in order to grow up. I mean, and you see this playing itself out in Fiddler on the Roof, for instance. The the story before what we're used to seeing on screen or in the book is they didn't feel like they needed to disobey their parents. And then modern culture comes and they start disobeying their parents. So it's a cultural interpretation
So
also.
I would agree with you. the central story behind Fiddler on the Roof is each generation being freed from the generation before them. And I have this teaching, which is it's I don't even know if it's on my website, about Fiddler and deep Jewish lessons. But I read a couple of books about Fiddler, and it was produced in Japan, and the Japanese producer said he couldn't understand how this show could succeed in the United States because it was such a Japanese story, which I found fascinating. Okay, so I'm going to go one more slide, and then we'll pick up in 2 weeks. And this is the book I mentioned. Oh, it's not Larry Kushner. Sorry. It's Harold Kushner, who wrote, best known for his book, When Bad Things Happen to Good People. How Good Do We Have to Be? Very small book. A New Understanding of Guilt and Forgiveness. So my interpretation of this, or the interpretation I'm going to give, will very much follow this book. It's a very small book. So what are the consequences? If it wasn't a sin, then there shouldn't be punishments. Perhaps the story is a parable about humanity leaving infancy and or leaving the animal world and becoming human. Perhaps the consequences are really God lovingly explaining to us what it means to be human rather than punishing us. And yeah, we're gonna get into it. And part of this is going to be looking at the Hebrew, which of course, unless you know to look for it and you have the wisdom of Rabbi Kushner, you would miss it. So it's a little after 8. I'll ask. I'm going to stop sharing so it's easier for everyone, particularly on the video, to see each other. So anybody have any questions or thoughts? As I mentioned, I'm traveling next week, so we will not have a Monday class or a Wednesday class next week, but we'll come back to this in 2 weeks.
Will we have one this Wednesday?
We have one this Wednesday, yes. And that one I can't quite remember.
It's to death, to do the
yes,
dead.
yeah. Oh, yeah. It's communicating. It's actually what Maimonides, one of the great legal minds in Jewish law, talks about when he talks about communicating with the dead, which is an interesting one.
This is Bruce.
Hi, Bruce.
I do not know how to do the question, but I have one awe-inspiring. I'm 78, raised Catholic, very strict Catholic. I was in the seminary. Never has anybody ever told me that the Jewish faith didn't consider it original sin. So how Christianity hijacked the very people that wrote something and turned it into something else is beyond me. I mean,
so here's what I would say is I don't consider it hijacking. What I would say is that the Hebrew Bible is so flexible and open to so many interpretations that it can be interpreted in many reasonable ways. And one interesting question, which I don't have the answer to, is if I read this story in Greek, which is a Jewish translation, the Septuagint. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, Bruce. The translation of the Hebrew Bible into Greek. What do they use for the word for sin? And so it may lead to a different one. And then there's the first translation into Latin, the Vulgate, by Saint Jerome. And so the Bible is just open to so many interpretations. I would never say one is wrong and one is right, but I'm just focusing on the basic story. And by the way, Satan is never in the story in the Hebrew Bible. Of course, Satan is very much the serpent in Christian thought. And if I remember correctly, in the Quran, the holy book of Islam, there is a story of the Garden of Eden, and it's only Satan. There's no serpent. So the story gets, interpreted in lots of different ways. But thank you for that observation, Paul.
But let's say the
go ahead, Paul, and then Farah.
Let's say the mother and father want to go out to see a movie, and before they go out, they tell their son, "Please don't look in my drawer. I don't need you. I don't want you to look in my drawer. It's got some things in there I want you to see." And the son says, "Okay, I won't." And the minute they're gone, the minute the parents are gone, they have a conversation between them. How much do you want to bet that my son's going to look in the drawer? and the mother and father talk to each other and say, I think that he's going to look in the drawer even though he told them not to. And so the idea for me is that does the son have the ability at that point to make a decision not to look in the drawer?
I don't know. I don't know what you mean by the authority not to look in the drawer. The child has free will. The
Yes,
question is,
the
question, go ahead.
The mother and father would be very angry at the boy for looking
Maybe
at it.
yes, maybe no. Maybe they left his favorite dessert in there.
No, it would, to me, it would be, in my family, it would be, that's exactly what it would be. Don't look in that drawer. You're not supposed to look in there.
If you really had stuff in the drawer that you wouldn't want your child to look at, would you tell them that just as you're about to leave?
Yes.
Okay.
They'd want to see if I would follow their direction.
Right. So what you're describing is entrapment.
That's right.
Right. So in this case, you're agreeing that God entraps Adam and Eve into eating the fruit.
They can, yes.
So, and now I'm just following logic, good old-fashioned logic.
Please.
Therefore, God wanted them to eat of the fruit.
That's possible, yes.
And then the question is why?
That's what I don't know.
So I would argue that the reason is so that they could demonstrate having free will and understand what it means to be human and to be a full partner with God in making the world a better place. I mean, God could have made a universe without people.
That's right.
Without any physical stuff in it, just tohu vavohu.
That's right.
But God decided to make a universe with people. So the question is why? And one answer there, I was, talk about two answers. One is that if God is to be praised, then God needs people to praise God. I don't particularly like that one.
Yes, that's
it's
right.
pretty egocentric.
That's
the
right.
one I really like is God likes stories. And God wants to be in relationship with people. Ultimately, that's what the covenant is about. And God decided to create a universe where God cannot make the universe the way God wants it to be without the participation of people. So that's my take on that.
I can't agree or disagree with that. Because God, this is what I'm hearing from inside me. God created the universe, so He can do anything He wants to do. It's His job. It's His willingness to do what He wants to do. He doesn't have to make the universe.
So then the question is, why does He want to have people as partners in making the world a better place? So
the reason I think it is God needs to have. Let me back up for that. I'm getting lost in it. I'm going to have to think about that one.
Okay, yes, it's worth thinking about. Lesson and Erwin.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I'm thinking a little more about with my children. When I tell them something, I expect them not to do it, and they don't. And I can say right now, I don't believe they've ever disobeyed me. But I very rarely, if ever, put a do not or don't. So when I do, it's so rare and so special in the sense that Dad never does that.
So following up on something that Lois said, when they're children and the issue is don't play in the street or don't go near the fireplace or don't stick that fork into that outlet, presumably you would tell them not to do something, right?
Well, at that, I know that they're not going to be able to respond to it. I know they're not mature enough to really comprehend. And so what we had to do is put the little plugs in the outlets and all. So
okay, but you would tell them things as children to do and not to do.
I would tell them not to do it, but I would know they would do it anyway because
that's it.
But not necessarily. I mean, I think Lois has a very good point here.
A 4 or a 5-year-old, you say, don't touch this. They're going to be mature enough to go, oh, Dad doesn't want me to touch it.
Or you're going to make sure they don't touch it, but you're also going to tell them don't play in the street and, don't pet that dog. And there's going to be a lot of things. You're going to exert control over their lives. So my point is, that's the sign of a child. And I think this is a parable about humanity leaving infancy and becoming adult and human. So that's what I think the story is
Right,
talking about.
but when you're an infant, you're not, in my opinion, because I've got raised 4 children essentially. When they're 5 and 6, I mean, it's very hard for them to comprehend exactly what you want, and their
No,
comprehension
no.
lasts.
Well, I mean, I'll defer to Cheryl on this, but don't throw your food on the floor, right? Don't stop hitting your sister.
What I'm trying to
Um,
say is, you
Yeah.
can't expect everything you say that they're going to obey.
I don't.
You've got limits.
But the idea that I'm going to control their
You
life
can't. Yeah.
is the idea that I'm going to control their life is the sign of an adult dealing with a child. The idea that I'm not even going to try and control their life, except maybe give advice, that's an adult to an adult relationship.
Right.
That's what I think is going on in this
I
story.
agree with you.
Jerry and then Suzanne.
I think it's also about teaching consequences, and that if they do something, this is what's going to happen, so that they know if they disobey, that they're going to
Right.
pay for it.
And that's what the next discussion is going to be. What really are the consequences, particularly if you read it in Hebrew? It's a huge word here called itzavon, and it sheds a whole new light on the story. Suzanne.
Well, I remember reading a study about children, and they would say to these children, they'd put a plate with a marshmallow or a cookie, and they'd say, if you don't eat it and I come back, then you can have two. And they did a long-term study on this, and the kids who went ahead and ate had worse things in their lives, not because they were punished, but because it was just the natural consequence of not being able to defer pleasure. And I think, when you're saying, this is more to me like that. This isn't like telling a child, don't do this. This is more like that. It's more like trusting.
What's the pleasure in eating the fruit in the garden when there are lots of other fruits around?
Well, it's that, you think it's extra good because something good is going to happen, right? You don't quite understand.
Oh, God tells them
but
on the day you eat of it, they'll surely die.
Yeah, but the serpent doesn't say that.
The serpent says you're not going to die. Your
Right.
eyes will be open and you will be like
Right.
God, which by the
So
way turns
that's-
out to be true. But that's
Which-
but God says, presumably you would think God anyway. So I don't think it's okay. So yeah, so the serpent actually tells them the truth, and the truth is attractive. So it's
attractive,
just
but it also doesn't mean that there wouldn't have been God rewarding them if they hadn't eaten. I mean, there has to be an alternative. If they hadn't eaten it, is the alternative really that they would stay ignorant in the garden, or that God would have at a point said, now you can eat? I mean, is it forever that you can never eat it?
we don't know. I mean, but
Right.
that's one of the questions that I'll raise at the end. What would have happened? And actually, Rabbi Kushner has a beautiful little description of it. What would have happened had they not eaten?
Because
And
I think that
the answer is they never want for anything. They never have to work for anything. There's no accomplishment. There's no disappointment. There's no joy. There's no sorrow. Maybe no sex. Don't know. And somebody said, it would be an incredibly boring world.
But I don't know. I think that's maybe a false dichotomy. I mean, the kids who
It might be, but it's because we really don't know.
Marshmallows, they have better lives because they're willing to defer pleasure. So maybe if Adam and Eve had been willing to defer that pleasure, they would have had all of those things.
Maybe. Yep. Different Bible. I can't wait to see your version of the Bible. Les.
Yeah, I heard a Christian pastor say that in heaven, they say, would it be boring? And he goes, well, it wouldn't be boring because God takes the boredom out of you or whatever, and everything is like, I don't know exactly his idea of it, but you wouldn't ever be bored, and everything would be exciting and new and wonderful always, which is a hard concept, but
there was a Twilight Zone movie about this guy who's a gangster and dies. And I think the thing was he starts playing pool, and every shot he makes and every
Mhm.
card game he tries,
Plays
he wins,
blackjack
and
every time.
and everything is going, fantastically, and at the end he complains, "This is heaven? How it's so boring."
Yeah,
And
really,
whoever's accompanying him says,
really.
"What makes you think this is heaven?"
He says, "Where do you think you are?"
Exactly, exactly.
Uh,
Which,
I got a question. So
yes,
many translation from Torah to
Yeah.
Greek and then to Latin and to
right.
doesn't change the something in that. I
You
translate.
speak other languages, right, Farrell?
Yes,
Would you say so? You speak
Farsi,
Persian, you speak Farsi. So
yes.
when you have a translation of a poem in Farsi to English, does it capture the Farsi poem perfectly?
No.
Same thing with Bible. Whenever you translate, you interpret.
So which one is the real original one?
Hebrew.
And do we have that exact?
Well, we have our tradition, which says, here is the Hebrew text. And the interesting thing is, we have a 2,000-year-old copy of a good deal of the Bible, and it's not exactly the same as the text we have in our, on the shelf behind me, but it's pretty darn close. So, but the problem is, so you'd say, okay, well, that's easy. The problem is, we're not 100% sure what a lot of these Hebrew words mean.
But on that time, they were talking Arami language, something like that, not Hebrew.
Aramaic is a later language. Hebrew is an older language than Aramaic.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Someday I'll do a class on
Thank you.
Hebrew and Aramaic. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Bruce,
Okay.
for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time in 2
Thank
weeks.
you, Rabbi. See you on Wednesday.
Yeah,
Wednesday.
and also on Wednesday. Take care.
Bye bye.
Good.